Today we're going to talk about how to find the value of the 6 trig functions for any quadrantal angle, whether we're working in degrees or radians. So first, let's talk about the definition of a quadrantal. A quadrantal is any angle where the terminal side is on the x or the y axis. So the angle has to terminate on the axis. There are a few things you're going to have to memorize to be able to do this. Some of this you already know from previous lessons, but this is called the unit circle, and you will need to be able to fill in all of the boxes and blanks on here. So let's talk about them. And we're going to start out with the angles. The boxes on the outside of the circle are for the angle measurements. Okay? So in standard position, we know that the 0 is on the positive x side, or to the right, and if we go one whole revolution around the circle, that would be 360 degrees, or if we're working in radians, it would equal 2 pi. At the top, if we have rotated in a positive direction at the top, then our angle is 90 degrees, or pi over 2 if we're in radians. To the left, we have 180 degrees, which would be pi if we're in radians. At the bottom, 270 degrees, which is equivalent to 3 pi over 2 in radians. Now we're not working with decimals right now, but the procedure would be the same for the decimals. Okay, now on a unit circle, we know that the distance from the center of the circle to any point on the circle is called the radius. And we're going to let this radius equal 1 unit. We don't have any measurements, we don't have a grid, so we're going to let it be 1 unit. And if the radius is 1, then the coordinates for the point on the right side of the circle would be 1, 0. Okay, the 1 would be the x value because we moved 1 unit to the right. The y would be 0 because we did not move up or down. Okay, at the top, since we would only be moving up and not to the left or right, then our coordinates would be 0, 1. So x would be 0, y would be 1. On the left side, we would have a negative 1, 0, because we would move 1 to the left, that would be x is negative 1, and we didn't go up or down, so y would be 0. And down at the bottom, we would have a 0, negative 1 for our coordinates. X is 0 because we did not move left or right. We just went down 1, so y is negative 1. Now, what your problems are going to look like would be something similar to sine of pi over 2. The sine tells us what formula we want to use. Okay, so the formula for sine is y over r. Think back to your lesson on the 6 trig functions. Okay. Now, how do I know? I've got 4 different numbers labeled y on this circle, so how do I know which one do I want to use? Well, you're going to look at the angle that's given, which in this case was the pi over 2. And pi over 2 is here at the top of the circle. So I'm going to use these numbers for x and y, and on the unit circle my r is always 1. So if I want to fill in my formula, y would be 1. So on the top I'm going to write a 1. My r is always 1 on the unit circle, so the bottom would also be a 1, and 1 over 1 will reduce to 1. So the sine of pi over 2 is equal to 1. Let's try another one. Let's say we're going to do the cotangent of 270 degrees. Okay, again, the first part tells you which formula to use. So the cotangent, for cotangent, the formula is x over y. And the 270 is going to tell me which numbers to use for x and y. So 270 is at the bottom of my circle. This time I'm going to use this point. So my x is 0. I'm going to put that on the top. My y is -1. And 0 divided by anything is always equal to 0. So the cotangent of 270 is 0. Okay, one more. Let's try the tangent of 3 pi divided by 2. Okay, so tangent tells me that my formula that I'm going to fill in is y over x. 3 pi over 2 is in the same position as the 270. So again, I'm going to use the numbers at the bottom of the circle for x and y. But this time it's y over x, so my y is -1, my x is 0. Even though I used the same numbers as the cotangent of 270, they're not in the same position. So -1 divided by 0, if you try to put that in the calculator, it's going to say error, and that is because you cannot divide by 0. So when the 0 is on the bottom of your fraction, then your answer is undefined. Okay? And you can write that as UND. Okay? Any of the trig functions can be done using this unit circle. You will need to memorize the points and the angles around the outside, and keep in mind that anytime you use the unit circle, your R value is always going to be 1.